All right, and welcome to this special episode of Real Estate Fight Club. And this series is called What Would You Do? It airs every Wednesday. And with me here today is Rachael Real of Rachael Real Real Estate in Chicago. Hey, Rachael.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
You ready to come to a fight?
I am. I think we're ready.
I'm just kidding.
This is going to be a beatdown today. Watch out.
I know, you're fired up today. I like it. So in today's episode, we are going to talk about the duty of confidentiality regarding offers. And I wanted to give a little context here, Rachael. So like as agents, we have fiduciary duties, right?
Correct. Yes. When you rise to the level of agent representation for either a buyer or a seller, you have fiduciary duties to your clients, meaning that their interests are above everyone else's.
Right. And those duties are outlined as loyalty, disclosure, obedience, which always really strikes me wrong, as I'm sure you know.
It feels like a weird word.
It's a weird, I think it could be better, but anyway, reasonable care and diligence, accounting, and then confidentiality. But you see that this gets the confidentiality piece gets misinterpreted. So give us what happens usually.
So typically when you represent a client, so if I were to go say meet with a seller for a comparative market analysis, say they're interviewing a couple of agents and they share with me, their motivation for selling, some financial information, any information that I learned from a seller at the time we're doing that consultation is confidential. I can't go, if I didn't get that listing, somebody else does. And now I'm representing a buyer. I can't go share with that buyer what their bottom line is, what their motivation is, what their financial picture is. None of that's anybody's business. That's all confidential.
So the duty so that duty extends to clients and customers.
In that respect, yes. I mean, and in that case, when I sit down with a client or with somebody for a market analysis or a consultation, I'm giving them an additional piece of paper that says, hey, I'm not currently your agent because we don't have an agency agreement here in writing. So this piece of paper tells you that I'm not your agent, but I'm agreeing to keep any information you share with me confidential.
Okay.
As a side note, that will get you some brownie points when you're sitting down with a seller.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty interesting. I've never heard anybody doing that.
It is. People like that though, especially if they've interviewed a couple of people and you say, hey, and you explain agency and go, I'm not going to share any of this information with you.
Right.
Then they sit there and wonder, well, if I told everybody else that and I get this piece of paper, are they sharing that with other people?
Exactly. So, well, why don't can you send that to me, what you use, so that people can?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I will send that to you.
So we'll put that in the vault. So jennifermertlin.com/vault, and you'll have access to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
what about when you do offers?
Right. So what we're going to talk about today is the code of ethics and how it pertains to when you're representing a buyer. What happens to the terms of that offer once you send it out the door for the listing agent and the seller to review it. So while people may think that those things are confidential, unless you are submitting that offer with a confidentiality agreement, that information can be shared with anybody and everybody.
Interesting.
So it just sat on a panel not too long ago where that was the basis of the case.
Okay.
And it was interesting that everybody kind of thought, well, that's why we're here. But in all reality, it's not a violation of the code of ethics to share that information so long as you have the written direction of the seller to be able to send that information.
Yeah. So give us let's just do a very specific example.
Right. So in this particular scenario, and this can be any scenario, really, it's very basic. You've got multiple offers. So you're a buyer and you're representing a client. You submit an offer to a seller and a listing agent. They can review that when they're looking at multiple offers. Now they can take it with the lack of a confidentiality agreement, they can take that offer and those terms
and shop it
around and give you say, well, if you can, we like these terms here. If you can beat this, then.
But see, it seems weird. I would think what would cause them to take the terms of offer 1 and shop them to offer 4?
It depends. I mean, some sellers, when you sit there and look at all the options of what, the options you have when you've got multiple offers, keeping those confidential can be beneficial to you, because if you've got 2 offers and you really like the terms of one, you don't really necessarily need to disclose them in order to get another buyer higher.
Right.
And you might get that other buyer higher than what they would have been if they know this offer is, say, 250, and you want to get them higher than that. You can say, hey, my offer's higher than 250. Can you, it's
It
250.
just seems to me that, like, okay, so say you have one, like, I guess I could see it happening. It's like if offer four had the best, like, the offer price, but
Right.
the either the sellers or whatever had a bad experience with that lender, for example.
Right. It could come down to lender. It could come down to down payment amount. If you disclose that entire offer package, you may be sending out, the message that, hey, instead of taking this 20% down, you would take 10, but you just want the offer price to be higher. You still want
Right.
all the terms to be better. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily in your best interest to do that. I look at it very much as a case by case basis.
Yeah, I can see though how, depending on all the parties, like, there could be
Right.
some violation too.
It depends on whether or not you have proof from your seller that you've asked them in writing to give to you authorization to disclose the terms of that other offer.
Yeah,
Just
and
make sure you have that in writing, because then if you end up in a hearing, you can say, hey, my seller sent me this email. It
right.
says that I have the ability to go ahead and disclose this. You didn't send in a confidentiality agreement. We didn't agree to one.
Mhm.
And if you do have a confidentiality agreement, that all bets are off. You can't share anything. And that
Right.
even goes to if you have if the other buyer's an escalation clause, or they've used an escalation clause, which says you have to show me the next highest written verifiable offer. You
Mhm.
can't disclose that information. So
Oh,
you got to
yeah,
look at that
wow.
too.
So then what?
Then you have to look at it and go, okay, well, I can't disclose this. So then the next one other than that might be less. So then you have to say, okay, now get rid of the escalation clause. That would be your best bet at that point. So if you've got two competing offers and one says, I'll give you, 1,500 over the next highest written verifiable offer, but you're
Mhm.
not allowed to see this one, then in actuality, it doesn't exist for that purpose.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I think the confusion becomes that agents think that those offers are confidential when
Right.
they're not.
They're not. And
And the
really, when you
seller can
think about
basically
it,
do whatever they want.
absolutely. And when you think about it, in this particular case, the buyer was really upset. Buyer ended up canceling the offer. Buyer, was upset about the whole market, ended up taking their house off the market and said, hey, this listing agent disclosed my offer. Well, really, your beef then is with your buyer's agent, because your buyer's agent didn't have that conversation with you.
Right, right.
So when that happens, it puts you in a crummy spot.
Yeah,
So
I
you
could
really
see
have to
that.
have that. You've got to have that conversation with your buyer at that point in time.
Like, hey,
So
this
if you
isn't.
look at, right,
Mhm.
I mean, you just have to say that offer might not be confidential. So
Okay.
if you look at Article 1 of the Code of Ethics, which is essentially you just have to treat everyone honestly, but Standard of Practice 1-13 says when entering into buyer-tenant agreements, realtors must advise potential clients of, and then there's 5 things listed. Number 5 is the possibility that sellers or sellers' representatives may not treat the existence, terms, or conditions of offers as confidential unless confidentiality is required by law, regulation, or by any confidentiality agreement between the parties. So nothing, but there's no statute or no law that says that information has to be kept confidential. In fact,
Mhm.
it's the first thing when you walk into a buyer representation CE class. Everybody remember, these offers are not confidential.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean,
So
I guess I never really thought about it, but I can say, well, let me tell you about a couple of our partners, and then when we come back, we'll do
yes,
some best practices.
yeah,
So the two that I wanted to mention today is, the first one is my coach, Coach John Kitchens. And if you go to, as a listener, if you go to www.callcoachkitchens.com
that's
slash,
a mouthful.
I know, call Coach Kitchens.
And
He should spell
he needs a
kitchen with a
jingle,
C. I know
right
he
here. He needs a jingle.
he does need a jingle, I'll tell him. Yeah, so call coachkitchens.com/form and enter in Fight Club. You will get a free business assessment, which is nice, swift kick in the butt to get you going. And then if you are looking for administrative help, transaction coordination, a training class, head over to our partner, realsupportsolutions.com. And if you enter in the code Fight Club, you'll receive $100 off your first transaction or 3 hours of free training. So that's pretty good.
Sweet.
So Rachel, so best practices, I guess, my question is I've never had a buyer that was like, I want this to be confidential. Like, what would cause them to want that to be confidential?
I think you see that more commonly in situations where the buyer might be a celebrity and doesn't
Yeah.
want, in my market, we don't see a whole heck of a lot of that. So, but that would be
We
the
see a ton of it in
biggest.
Cincinnati.
Right, do you?
Lots of
A
celebrities
lot of
live here.
celebrities. So that's kind of that's the example that they'll often reference, in the continuing education classes and things like that. Because
Okay.
people will say, well, why would you want it to be confidential? But again, if
But
you
it
want it
is
to
an
be,
interesting topic
there
because
might,
I have had
yeah,
agents get upset because we do mostly listings, right? And we do,
right,
if the seller says, like, we want to see if this other buyer will match the terms of buyer two, then it's like
exactly,
we are shopping it, right? And then I've
right,
had
right.
agents get upset and I'm like, I don't, okay, well, be
Right, and
upset.
right. I mean, if you've got if offer number one has great terms and you like their closing date, their down payment, their lender,
Right.
all of that stuff, but their price is maybe 10,000 lower than offer B,
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason why you can't go to offer B and say, hey, or offer A, I like your terms a whole lot better, but buyer B is willing to pay me 250 and not 242.
Right.
Will you meet that? And
Yeah.
if you will, great. And after I have the conversation with the seller, I say, hey, just do me a favor, shoot me a text, email, I don't care how you do it.
Right.
Shoot me a
Anytime,
text that
anything.
says
Yeah.
anything. Just says, yes, you have my authority to go ahead and share the terms of these offers with other people.
Nice. Well, Rachel, thanks for being on.
CYA, man. It's
Yeah,
all about
CYA,
CYA.
baby.
Cover your hiney.
If people have questions for you or they have a referral in Chicago, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Best way to reach me is on cell at 630-542-8688.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, ma'am. See ya.
Bye.